At Center for Executive Excellence, our mission is to take you from what is to what is possible. Whether we're helping leaders implement culture transformation, helping teams build trust, or coaching individual executives to accelerate professional growth, our goal is to offer our expertise to effect positive change. That's our wheelhouse. That's our safe space. Last year, we stepped out of our safe space because of the collective what is, if you will, was broken. To move from what is to what is possible, we must stand up for one another as members of the human race. We must stop ignoring the fact that the human race has devolved into a competition. We can no longer see something like the senseless killing of George Floyd, offer thoughts and prayers to the family, and retreat to our circles of safety. At Center for Executive Excellence, we've written about the neuroscience of bias. We discuss bias in the workplace at our leadership conferences. We share resources to invite our followers to build their bias awareness library, but we must do more. And so, we are committed to continuing to educate ourselves about the disproportionate socioeconomic harm imposed on members of the human race who are disadvantaged. We are committed to using our platform to push forward progress on inclusion and diversity. And we committed to partner with organizations to move from protest to policy to redress these injustices. And that brings us to right here, right now. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. I encourage you to participate and build community by using the chat box to introduce yourself, share where you're from, and share your LinkedIn profile if you wish. Feel free to comment and submit questions. I'll be monitoring the chat along with my colleague Danielle Alguas, our VP of Client Engagement. We'll be throwing in our own comments and some supplemental links to expand on what you'll hear from the panelists today. And Danielle will join us at the end of the discussion to wrap it up and tee up our next event for you. So that brings me to the theme of today's discussion, CEO Straight Talk. It's meant to bring the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging out of the circle of practitioners and squarely into the C-suite, to learn how CEOs of a variety of organizations are addressing DEI and why and how they're integrating it into their business models. So I'm honored to turn our platform over to our panel, starting today with our moderator, the indomitable Arthur Benjamin. Arthur is the Global Inclusion and Belonging Leader for Varian Medical Systems, a cancer care solutions provider headquartered in Palo Alto, California, that employs a team of more than 10,000 employees across more than 34 countries. Hello, Arthur. Next, we have DeLinda Forsythe. DeLinda is the CEO and founder of Innovative Commercial Environments, one of San Diego's leading commercial furniture dealerships. DeLinda launched the company in 2006, and it was recognized as an Inc. 5000 winner for 7 years in a row. Her upcoming book, Inspiring Generational Leadership, offers a thoughtful focus on ethical entrepreneurship, the practical integration of concepts of conscious capitalism, and the gift of mentorship for sustainable generational impact. Welcome, DeLinda. Bradley Nardick is the CEO of the Bazaar, Inc., a leader in excess merchandise distribution headquartered in Chicago. Bradley took over as the third generation CEO 3 months prior to the pandemic, wow, and led the company through one of its most profitable years in its 60-year history. Over the past 5 years, he has built a disability employment system inside the Bazaar. Today, almost 23% of his 170-person team are people with disabilities. He recently published a Fast Company article speaking about the tremendous benefits of disability employment, and we'll share a link to that article in the chat box. Thank you for joining us today, Bradley. We're so happy to have you. Mr. Rudy Johnson, our returning champion, is the president and CEO of Neighborhood House Association, established in 1914 as a settlement house that assisted immigrants transitioning into the San Diego community. Over 100 years later, the agency has become one of the largest nonprofits in San Diego County and has distinguished itself as a cutting-edge human resource service provider Hello again, Rudy. And our final panelist is Todd Lane, who serves as President and Chief Executive Officer for California Coast Credit Union, a $3.2 billion credit union based in San Diego. Todd also serves as the director on the Cal Coast Cares Foundation Board, which provides grants and scholarships to schools, students, and educators in San Diego and Riverside counties. In total, he has held executive positions in the financial services industry for over 30 years. He currently serves as director of the Neighborhood House Association and on the board of the San Diego State University Alumni Association. Welcome to you, Todd. And with that, I give you over to our panel and I turn it over to you, Arthur. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And thank you to the Center for Executive Excellence for allowing us this platform to have this conversation. Let me personally say to all of our panelists that I am extremely excited to be having this conversation with each of you. And so with that, I want to go ahead and get right into the discussion with our incredible CEO panelists. Our first question to our panelists, as the CEO, why is championing diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you? Why is championing diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you? We'll start that question with DeLinda.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thank you to the Center for Executive Excellence to facilitate this very important discussion. I have been a champion for gender equality for 40 years, and the first 20 years of working in the furniture industry, I often experienced discrimination, compensation manipulation, and sexual harassment. But I learned to deal with it, as many women in my age group did. We just learned to ignore it. I was a single mother, and when my son was accepted into Georgetown, that's when I decided to make the decision to start my own company. Helping others reach their potential, especially this next generation coming behind me, has always been a fundamental driver for me. And then after my son achieved his educational goals, I was able to focus on serving others within the company and in the community. At ICE, our higher purpose statement is creating space to transcend the ordinary. And as an organization, what we do is that we provide furniture for companies to create empowering environments physically. But even more important to our organization, especially our employees, is what we do to create emotional safe space within our workplace. And that has really created our inclusive corporate culture that is so important to my staff and to me. And when you have a safe emotional place, it's not only a place for your employees to thrive, it's also a place for creativity to thrive. Creativity really struggles to exist when it's a fear-based culture. So that became very important to us. And we've also created an extraordinary opportunity for young women with little workplace experience to advance. I believe that businesses can be a force for good, providing not just opportunities for a great income, but also very authentic human connection. Of course, I never experienced this in the working environment. And I realized that, if I could visualize it, I could create it. And it was a real motivator for me at ICE. And I have to say that it's been very gratifying to be able to create this corporate culture.
That is absolutely amazing, DeLinda. I think hearing you talk about the psychological safety and being able to be an authentic person, an authentic self, are incredibly important if we're going to talk about gender equality within the workplace. Thank you so much for sharing. Bradley, would you like to share?
Thank you for having me, Art, and I'm honored to be here with DeLinda, Rudy, and Todd on the panel. Have a lot of respect and admiration for them, so thanks for having me. My why is kind of twofold. It's a personal thing to me, to help people with disabilities find confidence through their work. And it's great for business is the second part of it. Growing up, I was someone who was always in special ed classes. I was somebody who was in, freshman math my senior year and had a teacher's aide and all these things. And the story I was spun was, you'll be lucky to sweep the floors, which ironically, my dad did have me sweep the floors when I was working at the business as a kid. But it really hurt me as a young man to get told that I was kind of not going to amount to much. And I had a minor disability in ADD and ADHD. There are people who are much more severely disabled who get told an even worse story. And so my why really relates to using the business as a vehicle in an arena to practice empowering people with disabilities to do their best work and to find a sense of self-reliance and to find a sense of confidence through their work. And perhaps most importantly, a sense of belonging. And, my job is to be the CEO of the business. I still have a company to run every day, and I lose sight of that sometimes. I'm mission first in moments, but the business case is really unbelievable. Our turnover rate has dropped significantly. We have people coming to work for us who are thrilled to be there, and that's infectious. And it's been just great medicine for our company, especially through the pandemic when we've needed to find a common mission, needed to band together. And, it's forced me to rethink what a job it really is. And it's made us better at training, better at hiring, and we've created a culture of support. And it's immeasurable how powerful that is for the ROI for the business as well.
Wow, I heard you say so many nuggets in that, Bradley, I heard you talk about empowerment, heard you talk about a culture of support, heard you talk about belonging. Those are such monumental elements of the diversity work. And it's pretty amazing to see as a CEO, you holding to that as you lead an entire organization and business. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Art. Thank you.
Rudy, would you add to that?
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you for having us back at the Neighborhood House Association. Three things come to mind. Number one, lived experience. As a 55-year-old African-American male, life for me sure hasn't been a crystal stair. I've been fighting all my life, from the time I was born, public school systems, the neighborhood I came out of, historical Black college, etc. I was always the underdog. And so, I fight for the underdog every day that I come to work, both internally in terms of supporting my staff and externally in terms of serving clients. Number two, I believe you get your best school of thought when you have a diverse setting of input and ideas and individuals. And as an organization, we just, as a think tank, outthink our competitors because we're more diverse in our school of thought. And we're not getting that monolithic conversation across the boardroom. And Todd can attest to that because he is very, very good at the policy level in terms of our thought input. And then lastly, I really believe that this is a land of opportunity. And if you go to school in either trade school or traditional school setting and you work hard to earn a degree or a trade, you ought to be given the opportunity to show what you can do here in America. And I'm a big believer in that. And so again, every single day I come to work, I try to open up those windows of opportunity for individuals to climb through and really find those diamonds in the rough. So for those three reasons, I'm a huge champion of the D&I work, but it's also organic to me as a president and CEO.
Rudy, I love the fact that you shared really about your own personal struggle and really how your life was shaped as a minority, and then also carrying that into your leadership responsibility to ensure. I love the fact that you pointed out the diversity of thought and really the impact on the business with remaining competitive and giving a competitive advantage because there's diversity of thought at the table. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Rudy. Todd, would you close us out on this question?
Sure, and thank you, Art, and thank you, Sherry and Danielle. I will tell you, it's tough batting cleanup to this crew here because much of what they shared, I share as well. So I look at it from both a business perspective and a personal perspective. Like the others, I believe a diverse workforce and an inclusive work environment is imperative to more and better perspectives, more ideas, more innovation. And for us, it ultimately allows us to better serve our membership and our communities, not just individuals, but communities of people. It also gives us a greater understanding and empathy on events and circumstances that our workforce deal with both inside the organization and now outside the organization each and every day. You know, we all want to talk about and describe our work environment as a family. And, you know, the family piece of that's important. DEI, diversity and inclusion, is paramount to it being a family environment. So you can't have one without the other. And we certainly believe and want a family environment here. But there's another dimension to this, Art, and that is I've chosen an industry that it's a banking industry, as you heard in the introduction, over 30 years in banking, but it's credit unions. And credit unions were put on this earth to serve communities. We were founded to serve the underserved, to serve people of modest means. And often this means serving low-income communities and communities of color. So because of this, I tell anybody that will listen that if you want to work in a credit union and you want to serve the community, you got to be in the community, boots on the ground, and you got to look like the community as an organization. So our Credit Union California Coast leads and works with this purpose at the forefront.
That is amazing. I love the fact, Todd, that you bring up the importance of the D&I work being a reflection of community and that representation component of making sure that, again, your organization is representative of your community. Absolutely, absolutely amazing to you, Todd, and to all of our panelists with our first question. Question number 2, what areas of DEI are you most passionate about personally and why? What areas of DEI are you most passionate about personally and why? Now, some of you may have already hinted to that in your first question, but we'll go ahead and get started. Todd, we're going to go back to you for this question.
I love going first, Art. This is great. So first of all, I would say that I'm passionate about all areas of DEI. I think as a CEO and as a human, I'm not sure you can lead effectively if you are not. And our organization looks for continuous progress in everything DEI related. But I want to focus a bit on a specific area of diversity and inclusion, and that is inclusion. And I'm very passionate about financial and economic inclusion. Our organization is very focused, laser focused on getting back to sort of my previous response, getting back to the roots of credit union and what we were put on this earth to do, which is financial and economic inclusion. So the credit union system in the United States was founded by immigrants. Yet today, immigrants, both documented and undocumented, are often underserved. And in some respects, they are preyed upon. You just need to look at how they conduct business, how our immigrant community conducts business to see aspects of that. And I would also say that many people don't know, and even some people in my own profession, that all financial institutions can legally serve both documented and undocumented immigrants. But they don't. And they don't because of perhaps old beliefs, old habits, policies, procedures related to identifying that person that you're banking with. You know, if they don't have an ID, don't have a social security card, how the heck are we going to do business with them? That's what really gets in the way of opening an account and serving them. So what happens, Art, is we have a system where many immigrants, you know, people of color and low-income communities are charged exorbitant fees and interest rates to do mainstream sort of payment services, such as cashing a check. Sounds simple, but cashing a check, getting a short-term loan, getting money back to their home country, sending money back to their home country. And where does this preying take place, and where do these exorbitant fees take place? They are in payday lenders, check cashing outlets, liquor stores. We have a lot of in our immigrant community that are going into a local liquor store or a market, a community market, and cashing a check, an employment check, and they're charged exorbitant fees, huge percentages. So you have this not a mainstream financial community serving the immigrant community. And so when you look at the data, we have about 5,000 banks in the US and about the same number of credit unions, about 5,200 credit unions in the US, yet there are 23,000 payday lenders and check cashing outlets in the US. Now, you won't see those payday lenders in affluent communities or even middle income communities. Where are they? They are in low-income communities. They are in communities of color. And to put an even bigger perspective on this, and I read this several years ago, and I check on it all the time, there are actually twice as many payday lenders and check cashing outlets in the US than there are McDonald's and Starbucks. There are twice as many. There's about 12,000 McDonald's in the US and about 6,000, little over 6,500 Starbucks. That's amazing that you have, that many, sort of financial service firms serving those communities in the US. And just one other piece of data that's always has stuck with me: in the state of New Mexico, there's 42 payday lenders per 100,000 people. Yet there's only 4.4 McDonald's serving 100,000 people. Now, I'm not telling anybody to go to McDonald's, certainly, but it just puts it in perspective. So that's one reason that I'm passionate about financial inclusion and economic inclusion. California Coast Credit Union's very close in San Diego to our southern border, where we see entry of a lot of Hispanic and even Chinese immigrants. The Chinese immigrants choose the southern border most often. And so we are making our credit union available to the very people that we were put on earth to serve. So it's actually quite easy in that respect, but there's lots of changes that have to happen to make that the case. So we are making those changes, and we're also actually exploring a digital-only credit union that serves specifically the Hispanic immigrant community, with specific products and services geared towards that community.
Todd, that is absolutely amazing. First of all, that was incredible information. I know many of our listeners probably have never heard of financial inclusion or economic inclusion. That's usually not a traditional part of what we talk about with our diversity and inclusion work and program. So thank you so much for bringing that to the forefront. And thank you so much to California Coast Credit Union for what you are looking to do with responding to that need and filling that gap in relation to financial and economic inclusion. Our next person we will go to is DeLinda. DeLinda, would you share with us what are you most passionate about personally and why?
Yeah, absolutely. And very similar to Todd, the inclusion in our inclusive, having an inclusive culture is really important to us, as well as diversity of thought. That's really important. And there's a lot of statistics, and I think, Todd, you alluded to that too. There's a lot of statistics that confirm when you have diversity of thought, you have a more creative workforce, you have more creative ideas coming out, you have more innovation. It lends itself to a more innovative, to increased innovation within the community and within the company. ICE is what I call a conscious business enterprise, and we consciously work to set an example for how successful an organization can be when they incorporate the fundamental ethical principles of the conscious capitalism movement. And there's 4 principles to that, and having a conscious culture is one of those. It's equal stakeholder value, conscious leadership, conscious culture, and having a higher purpose. Those are the 4 values. And I've already touched on a little bit about the inclusive corporate culture, but the other thing that we did probably right from the beginning is create a culture of mentorship. It was top-down mentorship is how it started, but now we have a very robust peer-to-peer mentorship. So we're helping these young people, because we do have mostly millennials. We have all age groups, but we seem to have a lot of millennials. When I started the organization as a startup, anybody who had a lot of experience didn't feel comfortable coming to our organization. So it started out that I would hire a lot of daughters of friends and people that were looking for a job that didn't have a whole lot of workplace experience. And that was kind of the culture of our company and who we could attract. And it's kind of still there. So this culture of mentorship was just ingrained right from the beginning. It wasn't something that we did consciously, it just kind of evolved. And Elise Cooper is a great example of this mentorship approach that we've taken. She's been with us for 13 years. She started as a freshman in college, and she worked full-time and was also going to school full-time. She now serves as our president, and she has aspirations to purchase ICE from us. She's actually been wanting to do that for the last 5 years, and we think that this is the year that's going to come to fruition. And I'm very excited to pass the torch to such an empowering young leader, and that just inspires everybody at our organization of how we advance, especially young women who tend to be oftentimes marginalized in the workforce. My 2021 word is unity, and I've actually just started studying the speeches of Martin Luther King, because he was just such a lion for a unified nation. And I actually highly recommend this book. It's I Have a Dream, and it's of course titled after his most famous speech. But what most people don't realize, that title of that speech started out as the March for Jobs and Freedom speech. He knew that the tools to build wealth and increase social mobility starts with securing a good job, or starting a business, or buying a home. And Todd can allude to that. He's talked about that too, you know, that financial inclusion and giving everybody the same opportunity. That is absolutely the key to promoting opportunity for everyone. You know, I say I can't change the world. We can't change the world, but we can all absolutely make an imprint in the lives of the people whose world we share every day in the smallest of ways. And it starts with appreciation and developing gratitude for each other. And we can all make that, you know, that mind shift. It's a mind shift, a mindset shift that makes a difference not only in our lives and not only in others, the lives of others, but in our lives. And that's something that I think can really create unity.
DeLinda, thank you so much for just such a thought-provoking just share. I think that hearing you talk about unity and also about the generational diversity as well as the gender diversity are some incredible aspects of D&I that I think many companies are looking for ways to implement and to really engage in. So thank you so much. Next, we will have Rudy. Rudy, would you share with us your thought on the area that you're most passionate about and why?
Well, first of all, let me just say, like Todd mentioned, I feel like this is a bit of a trick question because there is no right answer. To be quite frank with you, every aspect is important. Everyone has value. And when they sit at the table that I'm at, they have their own individual style, their uniqueness, in their school of thought that I appreciate. So I can't in good conscience say any particular aspect is better or more important than the other. But let me talk just a little bit about economic inclusion, because Todd started this off and he's smiling down there in the corner. I can see him. So on the back end, you have financial institutions like Todd and the credit union that are banking you or housing you and nurturing you financially. I'm on the front end. I'm a job creator, and I knew coming into this role 15 years ago, I had the responsibility of creating and maintaining full-time positions. And what that means, not just a salary, we're talking about medical coverage for families. So now if someone's child falls and skins a knee, we can take them to the emergency room because we protected that job for mom or dad, right? So that's a huge responsibility as a president and CEO. Even further than that, I'm trying to encourage, promote, develop employees so they can move into roles where they can turn around and send their kids to college, because college isn't free, right? So we have a lot of employees that have children and grandchildren in school. That's generational wealth building. Once they finish college, they'll be able to come on board here at the neighborhood house or somewhere else in the San Diego community, make an honest living. And then there's asset building. So now we put them in a position where they can buy their first townhome, or they can buy their first condo, parlay that into a single family dwelling, pass that down to the next generation. So Todd started a great conversation in that not a lot of people of color get an opportunity to create the opportunity to build wealth, send kids to college, and ensure they leave a better place than they found it for their family. That's why I come to work every day. That's why I take my job so importantly. And I know, God forbid something were to happen to me, or, if I were to move on somewhere else, I would carry that responsibility. There are 850 team members depending on that. And so you don't take that lightly. And I surely don't. So that's how I see it when I start thinking about economic inclusion. And I want to thank Todd for sparking that conversation, because it's very important.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Great insight, great passion behind economic inclusion and just how you view your role as the CEO of Neighborhood House. Absolutely inspiring. Lastly, to close out this question, Bradley, we want to have you add your thought and your perspective to this. Talk to us a little bit about the areas of DEI you are most passionate about personally and why.
Thanks, Art. I've got a notepad full of things here. I'm learning a lot from these people. This has been great. For me, disability employment is the thing I know most. And I definitely share the sentiment that people who are minorities need more opportunities in the workplace, and women need more opportunities in the workplace, especially leadership positions. That's probably true for minorities, women, and many other classes of people. But for me personally, I have focused on inclusive hiring practices, building a workplace that someone who is cognitively different or physically different can come get the proper support and thrive in the workplace. And that's the area I've spent most of my time in. In 2019, less than 20% of people with disabilities were employed. It's an astonishing statistic. And it's our mission at the Bazaar, which is a mid-sized family-owned business, to try and create a system and set an example for bigger companies to potentially steal and build off of. And what I love about being involved in disability employment is it's really, I think in a lot of business environments, it's highly competitive. You know, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, and we best not blend those things together. But what I've learned being involved in the disability employment community is we have made contact with outstanding companies. The VP of HR supply chain for Sephora, Tom Gustafson, and I have become good friends. He has over 1,000 people with disabilities who work for him, and we share best practices all the time. So I kind of see it as the rising tide raises all the ships. Yeah, I don't know if there's much more I could add that hasn't already been said. I definitely believe in the power of being part of a team and having that be a place where you could think of your life and yourself differently. And we see that over and over again with the people who come to the job. The first program I ever ran at our company was at one of our retail stores in the west side of Chicago. And we had partnered with a local school. About 10 kids with autism were working for us at the time. And on day one, there was a young woman named Sarah sitting in the back room crying because the thought of speaking with a stranger was terrifying to her. And we believe in positive reinforcement. We're not a break it down to build you up people. We're, you know, the hardest part of COVID for me is I'm a hugger. And that's not allowed anymore, Art. But, you know, we try and reinforce a positive way all the time. And by the end of the 8-week internship, this young woman, Sarah, was up at the cash register, greeting people, saying, hello, welcome to Bargains in a Box. Thank you for coming. Bargains in a Box is the name of our little retail chain. And I think that's a cool thing to see. And it's an honor to witness it. And I feel responsible for that. The same way that Rudy feels responsible to make sure that his team can set their family up for future generations. I feel responsible to make sure that the people who come on board with us, you know, are in a better position to live a fulfilling life through having a job and through getting a job. So that's my little piece of the quilt there.
Bradley, every time you share, it is always inspiring. And so thank you. I love your point about creating a culture of support. I think a lot of organizations can take note of that, of how do we create a better culture of support, and your point about the collaboration, partnering with other organizations to find out best practices. Absolutely amazing. Question number 3 for our panelists. In light of George Floyd's death and so many others in 2020, how has those things or those events impacted or shaped your personal perspective on the DEI work? What do you hope your DEI actions and commitments will accomplish in your community and workplace culture moving forward? All right, we will start with Rudy on this question.
Thank you, Art. And before I answer that question, let me just say one thing, because I've heard the saying, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. I've heard it a couple times tonight. And I was in Washington, D.C. about 3 years ago, and I heard someone say that. I kind of raised my hand. I said, you know, that's a true statement if you actually have a boat. And so many, you know, days I go to work, I interface with people that don't own a boat. And the first thing we need to do is make sure every American has a boat, so that, you know, once the tide rises, we all get to rise. So I just wanted to say that thing, because I couldn't sit on that. And it's just perspectives and lenses. You know, we all mean it. I mean it. But I've realized everyone doesn't have a boat to be lifted out of. So I appreciate the opportunity to say that. But everything changed after George Floyd's death. Everything changed for me personally. And I shared this story with the panelists earlier, there are 3 calls that you can receive during the course of a day that you'll stop whatever you're doing and take. 1, your significant other. 2, your children, if you have children or grandchildren. And 3, if your parents are alive, either your mother or father, right? And after George Floyd's death, I was sitting on my couch, my phone rings, it's my mother. And she was almost in tears. She was very upset. She was distraught emotionally. And she said, enough is enough. And she said, son, I need you to do something for me. And I said, yes, Mom, what is it? And she said, I want you to use all of your cachet. That's like everything I have to push into the center of the table. All my poker chips I've saved up for 33 years of my career, and bring the business community and the inner city community leaders together with the police department across the region. And so for the past 7 months, myself, a couple members of my team, Shantae Lampkin and others, we've been meeting with the local sheriff, San Diego Police Department, Chula Vista PD, and really having a serious dialogue about 3 areas of policing. 1, recruitment and onboarding. 2, in-service training. And 3, community engagement on an ongoing basis so that we don't have to experience anything like that here in San Diego County. They've been very difficult discussions, honest discussions, but fruitful discussions. And my goal is to see change over time in the way the selection process happens, the training happens for police officers that are on the job, and eventually how the community interface with the police department as a whole. Because at the end of the day, we're all tax-paying citizens, and they're here to protect and serve everyone, not just a few of us. And it shouldn't be based on your gender, shouldn't be based on your sexual preference, and it doggone sure shouldn't be based on your ethnicity. And so I think we're making progress, and I'm glad to be part of that ongoing dialogue.
That's absolutely amazing, Rudy. Thank you for taking the D&I and conversation and work to the community, and really looking for ways to collaborate, to move and make a better relational environment in our community between the members of our community and those that serve our community. Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Bradley. Bradley, would you share with us?
Thank you. The events that took place when George Floyd was murdered were a tragedy, and from my perspective, a crime. And for obvious reasons, as someone who is white and grew up in the north suburbs of Chicago, I've never experienced discrimination from police. I've never been harassed by police. And to even lay it out further, I don't have many people in my personal network who have. And I think when that moment in time came, it was definitely a wake-up call for me personally to recognize that sometimes you can't see the bubble you're in, and it's almost impossible to, unless it bursts from the outside. And I feel that on a personal level, my responsibility is to keep doing the work I'm dedicated to doing. I've been working to try and help create jobs for people who wouldn't otherwise get them for 6 years almost. And this is a moment to reinforce that mission. I'm a firm believer that from the standpoint of leadership, trying to lead at a macro level is a very difficult thing. There are very few people who can affect policy and change. I personally don't feel fit to do that at this moment, but what I do feel fit to do is lead the people in my organization. And I would say that nothing has changed for our mission. However, we partnered with a group called CARA, who is focused on employment for former felons and people who were experiencing homelessness. And we hired a gentleman from their organization named Lawrence, who had been incarcerated and who had struggled with drug use and who had trouble with the police his entire life, and who was a Black man who grew up on the streets of Chicago. And I'm telling you, this gentleman who has joined our organization is a force of nature. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever met. He is an honest, kind guy, and we're honored to have him. And I can't help but feel like if George Floyd were given opportunity or support, which I don't know George Floyd's whole story before he was killed, so I can't say definitively what happened, but I feel that it's an example of what's possible if you give somebody an opportunity and you're invested in their success. So that's my take on it.
I definitely appreciate that, Bradley. Great insight. Love what you're doing. Thank you. Can you mention the name of the organization again where you hired the young man?
The organization is called CARA, C-A-R-A, Chicago. It's probably one of the best hiring organizations in the state of Illinois. And they do financial support, they do budgeting, they do housing support. They're a really incredible group of people. Maria Kim is the CEO and president of that organization.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Bradley. And thank you for what you're doing, partnering with that organization.
Thank you, Art.
Next, we will have Todd. Todd, would you like to chime in on that question?
Sure, Art. So the killing of George Floyd for me and for our organization has served as an accelerator and a clarifier of the DEI work at Cal Coast. So when George Floyd was killed and the resulting social unrest, we had many in our workforce that were hurt and are still hurting from that killing. And again, the social unrest that followed. Many of them sought comfort and answers in the workplace and looked for greater progress on our part in terms of our DEI work. So for many, Art, it really broke the taboo around discussing and addressing matters around race and gender and other biases in the workplace, and outside the workplace as well. So the discussion of what was going on outside came into the organization, which was natural and I think a very healthy and good thing. So fortunately for us, we had an inclusion council that was already in place. We had a 5-year DEI plan in place. And so to myself and others, this was a springboard for accelerating the plan and what we wanted to do in that plan. And it really began more of formal efforts around communication with our employee base and feedback from our employee base about DEI related issues. And by the way, that's what that Inclusion Council was put in place to do, is to represent our workforce. But it also served as a springboard for us working with our ethnic chambers of commerce in our communities around supporting and helping minority-owned businesses. So I talked about the community obligation that we as a credit union have, and that's where that connection is. So we believe that economically supporting our communities, minority-owned small businesses helps create generational wealth. And I think a couple, including Rudy, mentioned generational wealth, but creating generational wealth with people of color is so important. So Art, again, this all goes back to ensuring that we're living our purpose as a credit union. It's what we do.
Todd, that is absolutely amazing. I love the fact that you also bring up, again, the collaboration, the partnership with those organizations externally that give you the opportunity to partner with minority-owned small businesses. I also love the fact that you brought up how important it was for you all to allow the workplace to be a safe space for people to bring their emotions and to kind of talk and share about how they were feeling about the incident. Thank you so much for what you shared. And then lastly, who's going to close out this question, DeLinda, would you share your thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm going to echo a few things that everybody else has said as well. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about is those honest discussions and those difficult discussions. I just think this is a wonderful question that we're asking, because the death of George Floyd was so horrendous to all of us. And it really inspired me to understand the many perspectives of racism. And like Bradley was saying, that's not something he's experienced. It's not something I've experienced. So it's really difficult to know what you don't know and to understand what you don't understand. So I wanted to understand the many perspectives of racism. You know, those that experience it, those are here to educate us and eradicate it. Those that, you know, why it still exists in America. I mean, I just find that pretty unbelievable after all of these years that it still exists. So in one sense, it was a positive thing, because all of a sudden we started having these very difficult conversations that we hadn't had in the past. And racism, it's very complex. And as a company, at first, because I'm so vocal about gender equality and everybody knows my opinion, I was asked by one of my coworkers, you know, what is your opinion on this? And what is ICE's opinion and position? And I said, you know, I've never thought of it. And it took me about 5 minutes to realize it's time to start thinking about it. It's time CEOs need to really think about this and be involved in these conversations and shine a light on the destructive nature of racism. And we decided to use this safe and open platform that we have at ICE to encourage these uncomfortable conversations and to get it started. And so with the help of my coworker, Sharia, we actually identified several steps, I think it was 7 or 8 steps, that we could increase racial bias awareness within our employees. And one of the things that we have a book club at ICE, and we have a lot of young parents. And this was Sharia's idea, was to add to our library children's books that raise awareness of racial bias. And she felt that if you know, that racism is taught, and if you teach our children to respect and accept others, that was an important first step. And so we stocked the library with these books. And I will say, I share these books with my grandchildren, and they love it. And you can see their minds thinking about it and really contemplating it. And it's been a very effective program, I think. The other thing, and back to having these conversations, I participate in Toastmasters, and I encourage my staff to also participate in Toastmasters, and our audience and our panelists too, because we need to get comfortable speaking our truth and using our voices to educate others about racism, especially those who have experienced it firsthand. And finding your voice, it's very hard. It's tough to find that courage to have these conversations. And I know Toastmasters really helps people not just find their voice, but also to express their message and share their message in a way that other people can hear it. And it's in delivering your message in a very non-confrontational, very civil way, and respectful and listening. Toastmasters teaches you not just how to speak, but really to be a good listener and to hear what people are saying. And I think it's these small things that we do every day to move the needle. You know, they said we can't all do some of the work that Rudy's doing or Todd's doing or Brad's doing. But as a small business, we can do little things every day, and each of us little things to really move that needle and to increase the communication about it and shine a light on how destructive it is.
That is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, DeLinda. We have one more question for our panelists, and then we'll get to our Q&A. Our last and final question for our panelists is, what direction do you think diversity and inclusion should go in to stay relevant in 2021 and beyond? I'll ask the question again. In what direction do you think diversity and inclusion should go in to stay relevant in 2021 and beyond? We'll actually start with Bradley on that question.
So I think, personally, I worry about the working definition of relevant. And to me, relevance is not about news articles, and relevance is not about likes on social media platforms. Relevance is not about inspiring videos of one story of a person overcoming their challenge. And I think the thing I fear most about the tidal wave of positive change that's happening is that it also brings with it a lot of empty noise. People who have seen that the public consciousness wants mission right now. People are craving a sense of change and of unity. And I think there's a lot of people a lot of companies that I see kind of hopping on and seeing it as an opportunity for increased capitalism. So it scares me when we talk about relevance. I think more about what can we as the Bazaar do to stay relevant to the people that we serve and the people that we care about serving. And so what I would say is, in whatever aspect inclusion happens, it's about more than just the individual. It's often about their family, and the impact on that person's life spreads to their family's life as well. I joke with my team at the Bazaar that we don't usually hire a young person with a disability. We usually hire them and their mother and father, because we have a lot of calls with families, what we do. And we do that so we can stay relevant with them. I suppose that the other thing that I think is important as it relates to more people joining and creating mission and organizing each other to affect positive social change is that it's a practice. Inclusion is a practice. It's not a goal. It's something that happens day in, day out. And it's something that you show up to do because it's your work. And whether it's going to win a gold medal or no one's going to notice it, I'm of the opinion that it must be done. We worked on our inclusion project for 5 years. No panel wanted to talk to me. Nobody cared about what we were up to. We won 0 awards, and we couldn't care less. So I think that when what leaders need to do, and it's beyond being a CEO. There are leaders in every aspect of every organization, at every layer of every organization. What leaders need to do is find the mission that matters to them most. And what I've found is when push came to shove, and for the Bazaar's disability employment program to move from amateur to pro, we had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a few years. I stuck my neck out and I said, this has got to happen. We will not compromise on this. And I think that I think that that's a very important thing. And if more leaders took it upon themselves to lead from that heart place and that mission, then that'll permeate through their immediate culture, which will permeate into the wider web. And I think that's what it takes to keep things relevant. And Art, I love the question. I don't mean to nitpick at words, but I guess I'm sensitive to this kind of thing.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for shredding my question and completely annihilating it.
I love you, Art. I love you. You know that.
Thanks, Bradley. Todd, would you share with us your thoughts?
So similar thoughts to Bradley. DEI work shouldn't be event-based. As we say at Cal Coast, it needs to be breathe in and breathe out. And that's ironic given the killing of George Floyd, but that's the term that we use. It has to be part of who we are. It needs to be ingrained in our constant and typical efforts around learning, around growing and improving. And I think perhaps more than ever, we all have an opportunity to make generational change through DEI, not just economic change, but generational change on how we view relations in this country. So I think that's important. We need to understand that opportunity and seize upon it. And I'll just leave you with this one little thought, like how I like to share it with folks, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not strategy, it's your DNA. It needs to be your DNA. And that's what we are working towards at Cal Coast.
Absolutely amazing, Todd. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll go ahead and have DeLinda share, and then Rudy, you'll close us out on this question.
You know what I love about this conversation is that we're all kind of saying the same thing, but from a different perspective. And that's what's so, exciting about this conversation, because again, it's complex. DEI is very complex. And my perspective is I see this question through the eyes of a conscious capitalist. And I am very involved in both the local Conscious Capitalism San Diego organization as well as the national CCI Conscious Capitalism Inc. organization. And our conversations are kind of the same thing. It reinforces what we're doing. It reinforces our mission. We're all very missional. And I see how much leadership has evolved. And, last year was just a rough year for everybody, but boy, it just seemed like it pushed things so fast in the right direction with the right conversations. And that's what's exciting to me. Back to this conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism sees the values of the individual, the local community, the global community, and the sustainability of the planet. Of course, businesses have to be profitable to remain in business, but it's not about compromising. You can't compromise the well-being of the individual, of your employees, or the planet to maintain and to be sustainable as an organization. So that's very much the mission of conscious capitalism, that all stakeholders have to benefit equally. And it's really the opposite of short-term behavior. It's really an eternal perspective. And we need to see, we've all been talking about generational wealth, generational influence. And we need to see our actions affecting generations from 100 years from now. And for capitalism, there was a chat from Alan Reed. He talked about the millennial and the Gen Z approach to business. And that is for capitalism to survive, it has to change. And there was a major shift that happened in 2019. And it's also called stakeholder capitalism, or ESG, environmental social governance, that business has a responsibility to be a force for good. And we're kind of saying that. We're all saying that in our own way. And, going back to Martin Luther King, he was considered our country's leading civil rights voice. And he offered this very non-violent approach, an approach based on this uncommon love and loving our enemies and seeing our commonality. And it's not just, I call it JEDI, justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion. It's not just, is it relevant? And not to insult you, Arthur, because I'm going to say kind of that too. It's not about it being relevant, but to me, the question is more, why is it needed? And what's in it for me? And from a CEO's perspective, we have to present this, like what's in it for them, for their business, for their company, for their employees, for the future generations, for their families. And we have to make it really personal. And I think that if you want to get buy-in from them, you got to kind of answer that question, because we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are, they have a lot of weaknesses, they have a lot of vices, and greed is one of them, one of the worst vices. So when you look at the data and you embrace these principles, organizations that embrace the principles of conscious capitalism are 14 times more profitable. You're not going to lose. So to make us all like Jedi masters, right? Justice, equality, diversity, inclusion masters. If we can make it really personal, and you can insert it and make it emotional, and you bring love into that equation, that's when I think you make it very sticky. And, for me, I always look at it as this could be my child. If we looked at everybody, that we viewed people as our precious child, because everybody's someone's child, right? I think we could make it a little bit more personal. And that's when I think we could bring those words diversity and inclusion to life, if we can bring that personal element. And I think that's just what Martin Luther King did so beautifully in all his speeches. So that's my opinion on that.
Thank you, DeLinda. Such great insight, such great feedback. Thank you so very much. Rudy, you want to close us out on this question?
Absolutely. A lot's been said that I was going to say. I'll just say, in closing, number one, relevancy is in the eye of the beholder. So when you say keeping it relevant, it never stopped being relevant to me since 1965. So, yeah, do the math, that's 55. Todd's over there laughing at me. I see him in the bottom corner. But then, there's a poem that keeps spinning in my mind as I was listening, and it's called Live Your Creed. And there's a stanza in there that says, I'd rather watch a sermon than to hear one any day. And that's kind of how I try to practice, this art of D&I is, living your creed. I don't want to talk about it a whole bunch. I want to see you in action. When I walk through the door, I'm going to be able to read everything I need to know about you or your organization as I'm coming through that door. And I believe here at the Neighborhood House, I know personally, but here at the Neighborhood House, what I've tried to instill in our team, and I know the board expects me to, is to live our creed. And as Todd said, it needs to be part of your DNA. It needs to be organic. You shouldn't have to think about it. You shouldn't have to rehearse it. It should just be who we are. It's how we move about the world. And I think we're doing better. We have a long way to go. I think it's going to always be relevant as long as this country is strong. It's what makes us strong. Let me be real clear about that. And so I'm willing to do what I need to do to make it work. So thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much to all of our amazing CEO panelists. We are so honored to have had you all contribute to this important and incredible discussion. All of your feedback was just incredible. At this point, I will give it over to Sherry, who will be monitoring and managing our question and answer portion. Sherry?
Wow, that was incredible. I learned so much. I really appreciate the vulnerability, the education, the insight, and the perspective was really, really interesting, I think, with this panel. I would love to put myself in front of the Q&A because I have lots of questions, but I'm not going to do that. I want to share, if in case you haven't been multitasking, Sarita Pratt just posted something that I think is really sweet. It's thank you for having this panel. As we walk out our purpose, change agents get weary and tired sometimes with a heavy lift and rocky way. So this was definitely a spiritual and professional vitamin boost. So thank you all so much. You really have helped a lot of people who really have been carrying this. I know Arthur likes to talk about good trouble, and it's tough to have those critical conversations that DeLinda was talking about. But I think 2020 really was like a cheese grater that we all went through, and we had some really critical conversations. So thank you for sharing that. In the Q&A, and you can all pull this up too on your own in case my interpretation isn't right, but bless her heart, Cynthia Kamalo is joining us from the UAE, and it's about 4:45 a.m. So she asked the first question. She's been incredibly engaged, so I want to make sure that we get her question. And so bless you for setting your alarm clock and joining us for this, Cynthia. So at the top of the Q&A board, her first question was, what are your views about cultivating non-patriarchal or hierarchical mindsets in organizations? In certain regions, this is just sort of norm, and this stifles creativity and authenticity. It's not so safe to speak about not belonging. It seems that those in disadvantaged positions just keep quiet, so the status quo is maintained. Does anybody have can anybody share their insights on that for us?
I just want to make sure I understand the question correctly, so that there's no kind of organizational hierarchy. Is that kind of what she's asking, or?
Yeah, it says, what are your views of cultivating non-patriarchal or hierarchical, maybe in your own organizations as C-suite? Do you do anything intentionally to cultivate non-patriarchal or non-hierarchical mindsets in the organization? Maybe just boil it down to that.
Well, I think for us, we allow employees to engage at every level of our organization. If you want to bring a suggestion, an idea, there are vehicles to do that. We have all employees meetings. In fact, we're going to have one tomorrow. We do those quarterly so that you can engage. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have to have some structure inside an organization. I mean, we're 850 team members wide in 25 different programs strong. So there needs to be a hub of the wheel somewhere in order to, do what I call the back of house stuff, which isn't pretty, right? We still have to process payroll every 2 weeks. We still have to buy and procure items to keep the organization going. So someone has to control all of that piece. Mm-hmm. In terms of bringing ideas and innovation, I think there are a lot of vehicles and ways to do that. But in an organization our size, you have to have some kind of central point to do all of the, meat and potato stuff, if you will, mm-hmm. if that makes any sense. And I hope I understood that question correctly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Todd, do you have anything to add to that in terms of making sure that you're not ingraining that hierarchical or patriarchal mindset within your organization?
Yeah, just a few words, and I alluded to this earlier. We have what we call an inclusion council at the credit union, and there's many different approaches to that, and who should sit on an inclusion council. The inclusion council effectively represents the organization and is a feedback loop for the organization, and has many roles in promoting diversity and inclusion across the organization. Mm-hmm. And we chose to not exclude and not make it executive based. While I sit on that inclusion council, we have a cross section of employees, regardless of title, you know, many different ethnicities, genders, and so we really try and represent the entire organization. And that council is not chaired by an executive. It's actually led by a non-executive, and they are charged with things like, I think I mentioned earlier, we've done a survey following the social unrest to see where the voices that normally wouldn't raise their hand during a meeting and speak out what they might want to say to us as an organization. And this is the group that's charged with then responding and developing plans if we need to do more or something different. So I would say it's very much non-hierarchical in our organization.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know with a lot of organizations I work with, I often work hard to bifurcate the senior executives from other teams that are more collaborative and cross-functional, and say, as soon as someone from the senior executive team walks into the room, all the energy goes toward, you know, Q&A for that person and making sure that person is happy. So sometimes it is really important to just step out of the room, you know, trust that they're not going to, you know, drive the car off the freeway. They're just there to, you know, work on some issues, and they'll get back to you. And so I think it is really important. Even though Rudy is absolutely correct, you've got to keep, you know, making the sausage and keep payroll going, but also it's important to bifurcate every now and then and just step out and let other people, you know, have those questions. So thanks, Rudy and Todd. John Register, who I believe is from Colorado, he and I have been chatting back and forth on LinkedIn. He wants to talk about the disability advantage, Bradley. He said, we saw in the Q4 2018 Accenture report, Getting to Equal, the Disability Advantage. He said, this report, according to Ted Kennedy Jr., is the new frontier for people with disabilities in coming into the workplace. Brad, have you found, like Accenture did, that companies who are alike and aligned outperform their competitor 2-to-1 to shareholder returns, as the Accenture find suggest?
Hey, Terry. John's a good friend of mine. He was actually a Paralympic champion, and I worked with John in 2016 for Team USA in Rio for the Paralympic team. John's an unbelievable disability advocate. So I just want to say, I think John hopped off, but he's for anybody who's interested in disability, John's one of the best out there. Most of our competitors are privately held companies, so I don't know what their earnings look like, and they don't know what ours look like.
Right.
At a very high level, I feel that you know, we're in a game of opportunity buys. We have to be cultivating relationships with big suppliers for our business to thrive. And what that looks like is buying from companies like SC Johnson and Rubbermaid and Unilever when they have excess inventory. And what I could say definitively is we haven't yet told the story consistently about the disability employment work that we do, but for the people who we do come into contact with, that we share this mission that we're on with them, there's definitely interest, and I think it is a true differentiator for our business. You know, being in kind of the retail supply game, it can be very dry. You know, it's item at a price all the time, and that's what makes the, you know, the wheel go round for us financially. So I don't know any data on earnings, but I know that our company has done quite well in the last few years, and maybe it's because we have more folks with disabilities working for us. I'm not sure.
I think there's also, I know that there's a growing movement among the super high tech companies in Silicon Valley to hire more neurodiverse employees.
Generally speaking, people who are on the autism spectrum have an incredible skill for pattern recognition, which can be really advantageous when writing code or recognizing bugs in code. So that's a unique part of it. There are companies that are built just around that, actually. There's a great company out of Colorado called Blue Star Recyclers, and they have a staff that is mostly people with autism, and they do like gadget repair, gadget recycling, and repurposing gadgets, because the work is so detailed and so hands-on. And it's an interesting way of leveraging neurodiversity and having people that's their inherent skill set, you know, letting them use it to the fullest. And we believe in a strengths-based program as well. A couple of years back, we hired a Army vet who had injured his arm and didn't really have use of one of his arms. And because the only job we had open at the time was a e-commerce fulfillment position, he was like working on a packing line, and it took like 2 days before we were like, it's just not going to work for him. But he was a great communicator. So now he works on coordinating shipments out of a warehouse. So you have to play towards people's strengths. I think that's always part of the game.
Mm-hmm. Trying not to put the person in the box, but you know, reframe the box for the person. Yeah.
Totally.
I want to ask all these questions. One more question, Jose Hernandez for Todd. How do your members react to how your credit union is responding to the needs of illegal or I think it's undocumented members of the community, as you put it? He said, I envision that some credit union members might not agree with you. How do you deal with that?
Well, first I would say there's no visibility by the membership in general of what another member's legal status is in the United States. So again, you know, for mainstream financial services, it's all about being able to identify the individual that you're doing business with, whether it's somebody you're doing business with electronically, via mobile device, or in person. You're standing across from them in a branch. And we are able to do that via identifications. Everybody doesn't have a social security number. The ability for us to identify an individual, say via a consular matricular card, is very safe and secure. There's lots of old taboos around that and beliefs around fraud, and the ease of replicating those sorts of forms of identification are just simply untrue today. They're just long-held beliefs that are just untrue. So, so in terms of some credit unions members might not agree, absolutely. I personally haven't had anybody, you know, come to me with any concerns about that. But we had members that were concerned about our public statements that we made on the heels of George Floyd's killing and the social unrest. And that's fine. We allow them to express their views. I talk to them personally, and we share our perspective about this and why it's important to us. And it goes back to what I said earlier about what credit unions were really, you know, who founded us, who are our, you know, where our roots are, and what we're all about. And again, we were formed by immigrants in this country. And to suggest that anybody would have any difficulty with then serving an immigrant, illegal or otherwise, I think is, you know, really goes against the grain of who we are as an organization and an industry. So when we have these conversations, Sherry, I think they go quite well. People understand our perspective. They don't have to agree. We respect their input. There's many choices in financial services that people have. And by the way, during the political turmoil, which still happens, we had many members that want us to take a position on politics as well. And we simply don't go there. We do what's in the best interest of our membership. We are owned by them. And in the end, I think that sort of logic prevails, and most people see it eventually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the moral imperative really outweighs the, you know, the bottom line, and yeah, and we're relevant, to use the buzzword of the day. Yeah. For everyone. So gosh, thank you all so much, Arthur. I just can't tell you enough how much I just appreciate you so much. I know that you are just a distinguished scholar in this area. You're a practitioner. You should have been on this panel, and yet you stood back, as you always do, and you're so gracious to moderate and let other people shine. So thank you. DeLinda, you and I have had some wonderful conversations about this. So thank you for continuing that. I really do appreciate it. And Bradley, I learned so much from you. And I'm anxious to learn more about what's going on, what the impact that you're making there in Chicago. So thank you for opening our aperture to, who should be in the DEI bucket and how much better our world can be. Rudy, you're always a champ. I just love the perspective that you bring. And Todd, thank you so much for bringing the perspective of the credit union organization.